Guys, it's Van Diesel. This is Dev's channel, but like I said last time, he's kind of busy right now, so I'll be doing this deck profile solo for him. So yeah, go subscribe to him down below, like this video, put down in the comments what other decks that you would like to see him build, and if you want to go subscribe to me, go look up Van Diesel on YouTube. So yeah, let's get this started. This is Genesis budget deck profile. This deck, no one has, well, a lot of people have seen it, but this deck was relevant for like, at the very most, 5 minutes. Then everyone stopped caring because they realized, oh right, Genesis, this was the one deck that no one ever played when the deck first came out. So screw Genesis, and let's just wait till Uranus and Valkyrian come out and then just start screwing people over. So now let's get on with the Odin Genesis deck that only like very few people used, if any. Artemis. Aiming for the stars, Artemis being the starting vanguard. So auto, skill, and wrote upon draw card. There are many starting vanguards for this, considering they all do mostly the same thing. I just chose Artemis for this because you're going to have the main Artemis chain, you might as well run everything that involves Artemis. So here it is. And then once like the quick shield order and tickets come out, this thing comes useful, well, more useful, because if you go second, you get that plus 5k shield essentially. So yeah, useful, I guess. Triggers. You run 4 draws, 8 crit, 4 heal. The draw trigger is there because this would be the draw PG if you could afford it, but this is a budget deck, so that draw PG doesn't exist here. But pretty much the draw is there because the deck kind of has somewhat of a hand problem, so having that draw is really useful. The crits, just because you want to sack with crits, and if you don't remember what Artemis does, it'd be really helpful and you can just screw people over with it. And finally, the heal, because heal triggers are nice, you know, to prevent you from dying. If you want it to be super ballsy, you could just run 12 crit, 4 draws, but I don't think that's a good idea, to be honest. Okay, time for grade 1s. 2 copies of Battle Maiden, Mihi Kahirahime. I probably said that wrong, but I honestly don't give a crap. So, 8k base, 10k shield, skill, auto, rearguard circle. When it's placed from hand, the next time you would Soul Blast, it's reduced by 3. So this card is helpful, but only with there's only one card in this deck that's Soul Blast. Well, technically multiple, but only one of them actually has the keyword being Soul Blast. So this thing helps with that. So it's kind of like reducing it by 3, and it makes it easier because this deck does have somewhat of a soul problem. So being able to do that kind of fixes the problem, and it's just all around a good card. In this deck, it's not that important, but it's still important, so I'd say like run it at half, like 2. So then next up is 3 copies of our Swift Runner of the Clear Skies Achilles. He is here because there's not really another choice. Also because he kind of looks, well, I like the name Achilles, so that's why he's here pretty much. So skill, act, rearguard circle, shove itself to soul, and then it gets and then 3 of your units get plus 3 to end of turn. The plus 3 isn't necessarily going to help much. This deck does a lot of power stacking, and that plus 3 may be the thing you need to hit magic numbers. So it's there because of that. Also because, like I said, soul problem. So it shoves itself to soul, which fixes that. So decent card. Yeah, so 3 copies, I guess. Next up, 4 copies of our PG Pure White Witch Softy. Oh, whoops, that was a typo. Or whatever. So this classic Sentinel, you can only have 4 copies of it in deck. Auto Guardian Circle when placed, discard a hand card, and a unit cannot be hit till the end of the battle. And then Auto Vanguard Circle when it's placed, draw a card and discard 1. So it's there just in case, like, if you have to ride the PG. We've all been in that situation at some point in our lives where, like, we have to ride the PG just to get something off. So then we ride the PG, worst case scenario, and we still get the draw from the starting Vanguard. Then because of this, we can get another draw and then just have to discard 1. So it's not the end of the world having to ride the PG since you get, like, an extra draw out of it. So it's not that bad. 4 copies, though, because the PG is actually needed in this deck. Next up is 4 copies of the main grade 1, and our last grade 1 at that. Bowstring of Heaven and Earth, Artemis. My favorite looking out of the Artemis, surprisingly. So, auto, skill, rearguard circle. When it attacks or boosts, you may put a card from your soul face down as a divine gauge for this unit. That's where the soul problem ensues. Because your units that technically soul blast, quote unquote, but not counted as soul blast, you basically take cards from your soul and put them face down under it as a divine gauge. So you can't necessarily reduce that with Mika Hirahime because that's not soul blasting, it's just taking it from the soul and placing it under. So Can't really stop that, but you can still try to fix it with like Achilles and all that stuff to shove themselves to Soul, which fixes it a bit. So pretty much the Divine Gauge, it's like the Equip Gauge from Takikaze, where it doesn't really do anything except like where certain units have to be in play to do it, and that's what Artemis does. We'll get onto that later. But for right now, it's just like basically like a vanilla card under it. So then act Rearguard Circle, counterblast 1 and discard one of this unit's Divine Gauge, and then choose one of your opponent's rearguards in the same column and kill it. So by paying the cost of counterblast 1, this deck doesn't counterblast at all, and then getting rid of its Divine Gauge, you can just nuke a card on the opponent's field. It can be useful. Like, if you want to selectively get rid of something important, just call this thing here, and then like call it directly in front of it, and then get rid of it just with one shot. Not that bad at all. Really easy to do. Plus, it's each time it's attack and boost, so you can always get the Divine Gauge like right back, and it's for free, technically speaking. So yeah, really useful. 4 copies. Next up, 4 copies of Battle Maiden Izunawa Hime. So skill auto rearguard circle, 1 place soul charge 1. For the soul problem, I guess. And then, oh crap, is that soul blast? No, it's soul charge. Okay, then continuous rearguard circle. This unit gets plus 5k power. This is there because of that soul reason. Well, because of the soul charge too, but for the soul reason, it's a permanent 15k at all times. During your turn, during your opponent's turn, that means they have to move into extra forces just to get rid of it, which is really useful and awesome as hell. Next up, 4 copies if you're not running this in your deck, in any Genesis deck, you are a horrible person, you're an idiot, and the only one you technically have an excuse in is Valkyrian, but even then, there's like barely an excuse for it. Strongbow of the Starry Knight Ulysses. So, skill, auto rearguard circle. At the end of the battle, it attacked a vanguard, shove it to soul, draw a card, and soul charge 1. So, you get the free soul. Then you get a draw. Then you get another soul. That means that essentially pays for the cost of 2 Artemis Divine Gauges in the 1. Really useful, awesome, gets that plus draw, so the hand problem's kind of disappearing. Really useful card, run it 4 copies in all Genesis decks, except maybe Valkyrion. Turn it down to like 3 or 2 in that one. Next up is our final grade 2 and another Artemis, Twilight Hunter, Artemis. Skill, auto rearguard circle. When an attack hits, you may put a card from your soul face down as a Divine Gauge for this unit. This is the harder one out of the 2, because Bowstring, all you have to do is just attack with it or boost it, so it doesn't actually have to hit. This one has to hit just to get this gauge, which can be trouble, especially since the grade 3 has to like have a gauge for the main effect to go off, which means you have to go through a lot more work just for this to work. But if you're willing to go through it, it's worth it. And then continuous rearguard circle gets plus 10 for each one of this unit's Divine Gauge. That's at all time. So like 1 gauge already boosted up to a 20k base permanently during both your and your opponent's turn. 2 gauges 30k, 3 gauges 40k, etc. Which is useful because that just means it's like a wall of hellfire that no one can get past and just breaks through everyone. Which also makes it easier to defend, which means 1 turn of this thing hitting and your opponent already has trouble getting rid of it. Next up to the 1 card, well not on to grade 3s, but the 1 card in this deck that involves Soul Blasting to a technical default. Eternal Goddess Iwanaga Hime. Skill, act Vanguard or Rearguard Circle once per turn, Soul Blast 3, draw a card, and put a card from your hand into its soul, and increase this unit's power by 2 times the amount of the shield of the card put into your soul till the end of the turn. So, for example, say you had a heal trigger, and like say you're just going for final turn. You play Milkahara Hime, skill, the next time you Soul Blast is reduced by 3, call this thing, use its skill, the Soul Blast is reduced by 3, so effectively using it for no cost. Draw a card, shove, let's say, a heal trigger into the soul. This unit gets plus 40, because it gets the 2 times the amount of the shield, which is really useful, because that means this will immediately hit up to a 53. At the very least, it's going to hit up to a 23. Maybe even on average, it's probably going to hit up to like a 43. Wait, no, it would hit up to a 33. But if you get lucky enough, this thing's jumping up to 53, which is awesome. Just a really good rush card, pushes for numbers, and just all around good card. 4 copies. Next up is our main grade 3, and if we were building this deck without it, then I would question why we would call it an Artemis deck. But 4 copies of Battle Deity of the Night, Artemis. Continuous Vanguard Circle, all of your units with Divine Gauges cannot be chosen by your opponent's card effects. They get plus 5k, and the trigger effects that this unit gets. So at all times, they're at plus 5. So like Bowstring's at 13 at all times, as long as this thing's on Vanguard. Twilight's at 15. And what's even better, all of the units with Divine Gauges can't be touched by effects. So for example, Vanish Delete, okay, if I thinking about this correctly. Banish delete from like deleters. You can't get rid of this thing. Kagero burning rear guards unless they're just gonna nuke everything, because I don't think it chooses them by separately. I think that just counts as everyone. So it stops that. They get +5, which means some harder to hit. And then the trigger effect is this unit get, which is the real reason why this deck is broken. Because if you drive check a double crit, everything with the Divine Gauge gets the 10k and gets the 20k and +3 critical. So that means everything on your field is at +2 crit and +20, which means each column is hitting for +40 with 3 crits. So hell to all that oppose it, basically. And auto rearguard circle, when placed, you may put a card from your soul face down as a Divine Gauge for this unit. So that ability is not on Vanguard Circle, unfortunately, but then again, it'd be broken because that means this thing would be an 18k at all times. But still, benefits itself on rearguard, still useful at all times, 4 copies, obviously. Now on to the gifts. 5 copies of the standard imaginary gift Force 1, so when acquired, put it on a Vanguard or rearguard circle, and that unit gets +10k during your turn, and this can be stacked because it can be on the same circle. So if you put this on a Twilight Hunter Artemis during your turn, that thing's going to be at least 30. If you have regular Artemis with it, that's 35. Yeah, just broken. It can be stacked 5 copies, and then 3 copies of Force 2, because if you're running more than 3 copies of Force 2, because no Force deck can attack from the back row, you are high. That's all I can say. Like, I don't know of a Force deck that can attack from the back row. If there is one, please notify us, but I'm pretty sure there isn't one. So basically, when it's placed, put this on your Vanguard or Rearguard circle, and the original critical becomes 2. In this deck, I'd say more likely than not, you're probably going to use the Force 2 one a lot more than you're going to use the Force 1, because the Force 2, because this deck power stacks enough as is, you don't need anything else. The Force 2, that just gives you extra crit, which puts for harder numbers. I mean, Twilight Hunter Artemis, the grade 2, that thing can just wreck numbers on its own, and so can Iwanaga Hime. One of the grade 1s can do it. So Force 2 is probably going to be more likely than not the one you use more often. Force 1 maybe if you're in that situation where power actually matters a lot more than critical, because the deck already power stacks, but the Force 1 may end up being the deciding factor. So really, more likely than not, Force 2 though will be the winner, but who knows. Well, that was the video. I hope you guys enjoyed. Don't forget to like this video, comment other deck profiles you want, and subscribe to Dev right here in the description below, or maybe like on this little side thing. I don't know where it's placed right now. Or you could come subscribe to me on Vanity Ezel. Just look up on YouTube Vanity Ezel, and I do videos every Friday, Monday, and Wednesday. That was out of order completely, but who cares? So, bye.